Hello, I live in Daegu. Recently, coronavirus has stopped all casual functions of the city. I live inside the house. I cannot go out, and I cannot meet people because people, get feared of the coronaviruses. And I figure out that uh, we get feared because we do not know about the viruses. So I have been trying to find out what the characteristics of coronaviruses are, and what I have found is these are what I have found. One, the mortality rate is very high among patients with the baseline diseases from the elderly to over 50 years old, somewhat older than that. Two, very low infection and mortality rate in young people, probably younger than 20s. Three, the main attack targets of coronaviruses are lungs, heart, and kidneys. Four, the mortality rate is particularly high in patients with diabetes. Old men are usually low in the body temperature, whereas babies are hot. Patients with baseline diseases such as diabetes or heart disease may as well have low body temperature. The body temperature of elderly and those with baseline disorders in their 50s and older are often around 35 degrees centigrade, the body temperature. And the temperature of babies and children who are less likely to be infected with coronaviruses are at around 37 degrees centigrade. So my hypothesis, derived from here, coronaviruses disappear at 37 degrees body temperature and the most aggressive at 35 degrees body temperature. What I'm saying is, this virus cannot survive hotter temperature like 37, but they are very comfortable with 35 temperature. So they prefer low temperature hosts, human beings, There are variations in body temperature between individuals, and even in the same individual, the body temperature changes according to one's biorhythm, right? However, even considering such individual differences, the weakness of coronaviruses is the host's body temperature, definitely. 90% of corona patients end up with common cold symptoms, and so we do not, we do not need to treat them here. You should pay attention to the 10% of patients with coronaviruses. They are doomed to serious situations. So let's look at the most fatal diabetics among patients with the baseline diseases. Diabetes interferes with white blood cell production. Diabetics have only 30% less leukocyte production than the general population. During a corona infection, a process called fever is manifested. Diabetics have only 30% of the fever they can produce in the fever process, so their body temperature is low. The white blood cell count is low, so of course the combat power against the coronaviruses drops that much, so there is less fever. It gives the coronaviruses to completely conquer the patient, the host, and eventually he or she dies. However, in the general public, when a fever occurs, the temperature quickly rises above 37 degrees, as we can see, Although neither human nor coronaviruses are comfortable with that temperature. Anyway, coronaviruses disappear. However, if the patient is unable to continue the battle while maintaining the high temperature, the patient will die. There are some individuals, both young and old, who have a low body temperature. For them, coronaviruses appear somewhat more dangerous. The solution is to raise the body temperature by warming the external atmosphere, like room temperature. In hospitals these days, there are no such places as mentioned above. As you know, in modern hospital facilities, both Western and Eastern, the temperature in the room is never like 35 degrees centigrade. Negative pressure beds are also managed at 18 to 20 degrees centigrade. 65 or 69 degrees Fahrenheit. In other words, the temperature in the room is too cold for corona patients. Then, coronaviruses can continue a very happy attack, in these rooms. There is one more thing to think about. It's young people. Let's consider the high prevalence of corona infection in relatively young people, say people in their 20s. Coronaviruses are very sensitive to hosts' body temperature, as we have mentioned. Coronaviruses are clearly weak and are tuned to attack the human lungs. They kill low temperature hosts, maintaining their life in relatively cool place like nostrils, nasal cavities, and nasal cavity, to get ready to move to another host. How do coronas occur in young people in their 20s? Coronaviruses are lumped viruses like squid swarms. This takes into account only one condition, the body temperature. If the host's body temperature is high, the virus is disadvantageous. If the body temperature is low, the virus is advantageous. So my equation derived here is the destructive power of corona is virus population, the number of the viruses, times host body temperature times exposure time. So the more intake of coronaviruses, the higher you get infected. Even young people can't withstand corona attacks if their exposure time is too long. The bottom line is that after prolonged exposure to coronaviruses, they die. A simple way to get the coronavirus out of the body is that you keep your body temperature above 37 degrees. Then coronaviruses will come out of your body. It's all just like the old, traditional, common cold, just a common cold, for example, just like that. And if you frequently wash your hands, nose holes, and the face, and ventilate your room while viruses are off the host, they will die and their host will become independent. Let me suggest a Korean cold treatment. Traditionally, when you catch a cold, we heat up the floor of a room called ondol a bit higher than usual, in a temperature about 50 degrees centigrade. You may lay yourself on such a floor, cover you with the soft cotton blanket, and warm yourself. For intake of water, radishes are thinly cut into slices to make a radish water soup, and you drink it hot and take a sleep. Just take a night. After that break, the cold disappears usually, and so does the coronavirus, I guess. Similarly, how to cope with coronaviruses is to keep your body warm. Anyway, this is good way to survive the corona attack these days. Just a good way, I think. So I want to share it with you. Thank you.